Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Wednesday, and the patch notes have been posted, which means it's time for the top 5 changes of patch 11.14. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch, and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 11.14 is a big one for a bunch of reasons. There are a ton of high-profile champion and item changes on this patch. I can't possibly talk about them all, so this is why I do a top 5, by the way, but in general, there's a lot of stuff that we can really dig into here, and a lot of implications for the game going forward, some adjustments on champions that aren't doing so hot, and a couple adjustments for champions that are performing well in pro play, but which aren't very accessible in normal play, and changes to kind of help balance that out. So let's not waste any more time, let's go ahead and talk about the first change here, which are the Akali nerfs. Now this is one of the ones with pro play implications, as the changes Riot made to Akali recently sort of helped her get back in line in average and elite play, but in pro play, she's still really powerful and sort of a, not a must-ban champion, but a champion that's going to end up being banned or picked more often than not. As a result, Riot are trimming out some of the power from her kit, specifically her ability to cast Q in the middle of her E-dash, so she's then able to cheese out a little bit more burst damage in a way that only really pros could access. The other thing they changed here is her R's execution damage, which, let's be frank, is still completely ridiculous, but now it's a little bit less ridiculous, so you won't just be getting one shot by the single reactivation of Akali R. So I think these changes should do a lot to tone her down in a way that really were only pro accessible and shouldn't hurt regular players in too much of a regard. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the Dr. Mundo changes here. Now, I was concerned when these changes first got posted because I thought that Riot were nerfing his top lane while buffing his jungle, and I really didn't think that was necessary, but turns out that's what Riot were intending. They wanted to nerf his top lane, and they wanted to buff up his jungle. I guess his top lane has been a little bit overbearing, so okay, sure, if that was the intention, I'm totally okay with these changes. Now, Riot have mostly just nerfed his top lane in regards to his passives extra effects. The extra health regen he gets and the passive cooldown were both nerfed to give his opponents more ways of playing around him. They're rewarded more for poking off his passive before an all-in, and it's a little bit easier to force him out of lane because he doesn't have as much completely bonkers health regen that he had before. In exchange, however, he doesn't lose health for cleaver spamming large monsters, and he always swats small monsters with his E, which gives him constant AoE damage to keep his jungle item passive ticking and keep him topped up while sustaining in the jungle. So, in general, I quite like these changes. I think that in the top lane especially, it does give him a little bit more counterplay. He can be a bit of a brick wall in that lane, and it should at least help his jungle clear a little bit more than it was before. I still don't think he's going to be very good in the jungle, but at least he should feel a little bit more playable than he previously was. Moving on to talk about the Lillia changes here, as this is one of the changes here in particular that I wanted to talk about in regards to pro play versus average play. Lillia is sort of an accessible pro play pick. She can show up at professional games because they can take advantage of a lot of aspects of her kit. Her ability to move in and out of fights very easily and set up for big plays with Lilting Lullaby, which are sort of things that average players have trouble accessing, and especially because Lillia is intended to be a squishier champion. And she doesn't have a sort of crutch mechanic like Kindred's health regain on the W, where every couple of seconds they auto-attack a minion and just gain health back, right? Like, that's a crutch specifically intended for lower-level players who aren't as good or don't know about kiting a jungle camp so you take less damage, right? In that regard, Lillia didn't have that sort of backup mechanic, and so average players would just get beat up in the jungle. So these changes here are intended to move some of the power from pro play Lillia into average play Lillia. I think the biggest thing here is that her passive now heals her based on the damage dealt. I think it can only apply to one large monster at a time, and the effectiveness is reduced by 33% for every target past the first. But just the fact that she has some degree of healing means that Lillia is a lot more forgiving to play in the jungle. She doesn't have to kite jungle camps. Obviously, it's still preferable, but she has the ability to kind of face tank jungle camps if you're either unskilled with kiting camps back or just don't know that's a mechanic. And therefore, she won't take as much damage, which should make her feel a little bit better in the average player's hands. However, she did take some nerfs to her Q's movement speed, which is pretty sad. I really liked the Mach Fawn 1 playstyle of Lillia, which isn't really a thing anymore, but I do think it makes sense to try and nerf that down as that sort of pro play accessible. And Lilting Lullaby also took a pretty big nerf here. The slow was nerfed, and it no longer increases in duration as you start falling asleep. And in addition, the sleep duration is also down by half a second at all ranks, so it'll take a lot less time for you to wake up, so Lillia needs to be on the ball with her setups and follow-ups into the actual sleep, which gives you a little bit more room to counterplay because Lillia has to kind of hurry to make sure she gets that bonus proc damage for waking you up. So I think these are kind of fun changes. I think they should make Lillia a little bit better to play in casual play, and they do nerf her down in pro play and some of her harder to use aspects. So in that regard, the average player is going to quite enjoy these, and hopefully she's no longer a pro only pick. Moving on to our number 2 change, we're going to go back up here to Irelia. I've already talked at length about the Irelia changes, so I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time here, but generally speaking, these are going to be making Irelia less of a brick wall in lane, while gaining some pretty spicy late game buffs to compensate, such as her bonus ability haste on her Q based on her R's rank, and W gaining back its magic damage reduction. Those are 2 huge changes, and the nerfs she took in regards to those abilities and or enabled to gain those abilities aren't really that scary. In all honesty, I think this is probably a buff overall to Irelia. Like, yeah, you lost some early game power, but she's still going to be a pretty good champion in the early phases of the game, and now she has some pretty crazy hyperscaling carry potential. So, in general, I think Irelia is going to be a lot stronger following these changes, and she'll probably need some follow-up nerfs in order to keep her back in line. Finally, for my number 1 change, we are going all the way down here to the bottom to talk about Stridebreaker. And this should come as no surprise. Stridebreaker, hey, it got a huge nerf when they removed the dash. Turns out, it's still incredibly strong, especially on a champion like Nocturne, who already has good target access. He can dash on top of you, channel the E, and then Stridebreaker you, and there's no possible way you can escape before that Stridebreaker, or before that E goes off, right? Because you're just too slow. So, in general, these changes, the biggest nerf here is the halting / slow is down to 40% for 3 seconds, rather than 90% decaying to 40% over 3 seconds. So it is a flat slow, and it's significantly worse than it was before. So in that regard, it was technically nerfed. The stickiness is still there, just not nearly as powerful as it was before. The other changes here aren't really that big of a change. The attack damage and health is just because Riot can't do math, and you lost AD by completing this item, so they just rejigger the stats, so now you gain more attack, you gain the full amount of attack damage that you should have, and it's lost health in order to make sure that the gold efficiency doesn't change. So, in general, the only nerf here was that halting / slow, which it's still going to be good, it's just not going to be as bonkers at just holding champions right next to you while you get to wail on them for free. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Those are the top 5 changes in patch 11.14. There are so much more I could talk about here, but unfortunately, I only have 5 changes. So make sure you guys do read the patch notes and let me know which changes you're most excited for down in the comments section below. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I know I'm eyeing those Garen buffs, but let me know what you guys are looking forward to. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.